What is this? What is happening?
Are you Blessing Okafor, owner of Okafor Fabrics and Supplies?
Yes, that's me. What's this about?
You are being invited to the station. There are fraud complaints against this business. Several of them.
No, there must be a mistake! Fraud. I have never defrauded anyone in my life. There must be a mistake.
Ma, we are just doing our job. Please come with us.
Officer, I haven't done anything wrong.
I understand, please.
Who reported me? Who did this to me?
Blessing Okafor had built everything with her own two hands. Not inherited, not gifted, not stumbled into. Every yard of fabric in her Lekki shop had been paid for with money she earned, saved, and protected like it was her own blood. She had started with a market store in Balagona 23, sleeping some nights on a mat in her aunt's back room because she could not afford transport back to the mainland. She had kept records in a notebook before she could afford a phone with a proper app. She had learned every supplier by name, every client by preference, every price by memory. By the time she turned 28, Okafor Fabrics and Supplies had a shop, a registered business name, a BVN-linked account, and a reputation that her clients trusted completely. And Sandra had watched every single step of it. They had been friends since university. Sandra Eze was the kind of woman who filled the room, loud laughter, fast talking, always the center of whatever was happening. Blessing had loved that about her once. Sandra was the one who showed up at her stall on bad market days with food and a story that made her laugh until she forgot she was struggling. Sandra was the one who sat with her while she filled out her business registration forms, asking questions, nodding along, encouraging her when doubt crept in. Sandra knew everything. She knew her BVN because she had been sitting right there the day Blessing registered it. She knew her account numbers because she had helped her set up the business account at the bank. She knew her suppliers in Aba and Onitsha because Blessing had taken her along on 2 buying trips, proud to show her best friend the life she was building. She knew her NIN, her home address, her phone number, her client, her pricing structure. She knew the name of her accountant and the name of her landlord. She knew everything because Blessing had trusted her with everything, and Sandra had used every single piece of it. It did not start with anything that looked like a crime. That was the part that made it so difficult to see. It started with small things. A supplier in Aba who called Blessing asking about a second order she had never placed. Blessing assumed it was a mix-up and let it go. Then a client in Victoria Island called asking why the delivery she had paid for 3 weeks ago had never arrived. Blessing had no record of the order. She apologized, refunded the woman, and told herself it must have been a scammer using her name online. Then a fabric merchant in Onitsha sent a debt recovery message demanding 80,000 naira for goods supplied on credit to Okafor Fabrics and Supplies. Goods Blessing never ordered, never received, never signed. That was when the confusion turned to cold, quiet dread. She started making calls. Supplier after supplier, client after client. What she found, piece by piece, was a second business, one that shared her name, her registration details, her contact number, and her reputation, operating in the shadows while she worked in the light. Someone had been collecting payments from clients and vanishing. Someone had been ordering goods on credit using her supplier relationships and never paying. Someone had been signing her name on documents, speaking to people as her, building debts she would be left to carry. She did not know it was Sandra yet. She could not bring herself to go there. The mind protects itself from the most unbearable truths by offering every other explanation first. She told herself it was a stranger, a sophisticated fraudster who had somehow stolen her information online. She told herself that because the alternative, that the woman she had called her sister for 9 years had done this, was a fault she was not yet strong enough to hold. The police arrived on a Tuesday morning. She had just unlocked her shop, was still adjusting the display in the window when the van pulled up. 3 officers, a 4th with a printed document. The complaint had been filed by multiple parties, 4 suppliers, 2 clients, and a microfinance lender who had approved a business loan under the name Okafor Fabrics and Supplies 3 months ago. Blessing had never applied for any loan. She had not known it existed until the officers read it to her at the station. She sat in that plastic chair for 4 hours. 4 hours of answering questions she had no answers for. 4 hours of explaining that she had not placed those orders, had not collected those payments, had not signed that loan agreement. 4 hours of watching the officers look at her with the particular exhaustion of people who had heard too many people claim innocence. She did not cry at the station. She was too frightened to cry. Fear had taken the place where tears would have been, sitting heavy in her chest like a stone she could not move. Her lawyer arrived at hour 3 and began the process of pulling apart what had actually happened. Bank records, IP addresses on the loan application, phone numbers used to communicate with suppliers, transaction histories. Each piece of evidence pointed not to Blessing, but to someone who knew Blessing deeply enough to become her. The IP address on the loan application traced back to a location in Surulere. Sandra lived in Surulere. When the detective placed Sandra's name in front of her, Blessing did not speak for a long time. She sat with it. She turned it over. She looked at it from every angle, hoping to find a way it was not true. There was no such way. The address matched. The phone number used for 2 of the supplier orders matched a secondary number Sandra had given her once for emergencies. One of the clients who had been defrauded described the woman she had dealt with, her height, her complexion, the way she laughed, and Blessing had to press her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. 9 years. They had been friends for 9 years. The arrest happened on a Friday afternoon. Blessing did not plan to be there. Her lawyer had advised her to stay home, to let the process happen without her presence. But she could not do it. She needed to see it, not out of cruelty, not for revenge. She needed to see it because some part of her still did not fully believe it, and she understood that she would be free of the disbelief until her own eyes confirmed it. She parked down the street from Sandra's building in Surulere and sat in the car. The officers went up. There was a long silence, the kind that precedes something irreversible. Then the door opened, and Sandra came out between 2 officers, her hands cuffed in front of her, wearing a yellow dress Blessing recognized from a shopping trip they had taken together in Ikeja 2 years ago. Sandra looked down the street. Her eyes found Blessing's car. She stopped walking for just a moment. The officer behind her kept moving, and she had no choice but to move with him. She did not look away from Blessing until the van door closed. The weeks that followed were not easy. Clearing her name took time. Calling every supplier, every client, every institution that had been defrauded in her name required patience she had to manufacture when everything inside her was exhausted. She repaid nothing she did not owe, her lawyer made sure of that. But the emotional cost of proving her own innocence was one that no court could reimburse. There were nights she sat in her shop alone after closing, running her hands across the fabric rolls, reminding herself that this was real, that this was hers, that no one had been able to take it from her even when they tried. Sandra was charged. The evidence was thorough and the case was not complicated. She was granted bail pending trial, and it was during that bail period that she came to Blessing. Blessing heard about it from her neighbor first. Sandra had been sitting outside her gate for 40 minutes before Blessing arrived home from the shop. She was not in the yellow dress this time. She was in something plain and dark, and she looked like a woman who had not slept properly in weeks. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands were clasped in her lap. When Blessing's car pulled in, she stood up immediately and took a step forward. Blessing stepped out of the car and stood still. Sandra opened her mouth, and what came out was not an explanation. It was not a justification. It was a collapse. Words falling out of her in pieces, apologies stacking on top of each other without structure, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she had done. She said she had told herself it was temporary. She said she had told herself she would fix it before Blessing ever knew. Found out, she said, she had been in debt, had been desperate, had looked at everything Blessing had built and made the worst decision of her life. She said she was sorry. She said it multiple times, each time louder than the last, as though volume could do what sincerity could not. Blessing listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not flinch. She stood in her own compound, in front of the home she had built, and she let Sandra finish. When Sandra finally went quiet, eyes red, waiting, Blessing looked at her for a long moment with an expression that was not anger and was not softness. It was something else entirely, something that had come from the other side of pain. She said, "I heard you." And then she picked up her bag, walked to her front door, put her key in the lock, and went inside. She did not look back. She did not need to. Sandra stood at the gate for several minutes after the door closed, and in that silence, in the absence of cruelty, in the absence of drama, in the quiet dignity of a woman who had already decided her own worth, Sandra felt every single inch of what she had thrown away. The trial concluded 4 months later. Sandra received a conviction and a suspended sentence with mandatory restitution. Every supplier, every client, every institution was listed in the judgment. Sandra's name was in the public record. Her profession, her address, her crime, all of it documented in a way that would follow her for years. Blessing did not attend the judgment. She was in her shop in Lekki, restocking a new line of asoke she had sourced directly from a weaver in Iseyin, a contact she had built on her own name, in her own right. A client was coming in at noon. 2 more had called that morning. Her accountant had sent a message that morning saying the quarter's numbers were the best since she opened. She stood behind her counter and looked at the shop she had built and almost lost and kept anyway. And she felt something settle in her chest that she had not felt in a long time. Not triumph, not bitterness, not the hollow satisfaction of watching someone fall. Just peace, the deep, earned, unshakable kind, the kind that comes only to people who have been tested at their foundation and found that the foundation held. Outside, Lekki moved the way it always did, loud and bright and full of people chasing something. Blessing straightened a bolt of fabric on the shelf, smoothed it with both hands, and got back to work. Was Sandra wrong to use desperation as an excuse, or does struggle ever justify betrayal? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today, and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.